Right now we're going to speak, though, to Peter Lamb, who's Labour MP for Crawley. He's called the welfare cuts that are coming up in this welfare bill deeply uncomfortable. The welfare bill gets a vote later on today, probably early evening, I suppose, in the House of Commons. He's one of the rebels. I don't know whether he's still a rebel. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for joining us. You've called the welfare cuts deeply uncomfortable. Was that before the concessions? Does it still apply now?
Well, I mean, the concessions are important insofar as the last time that we had welfare reform, there was quite a sharp uptake in people taking their own lives because they couldn't work out how they would make ends meet without the benefits. So it's very important that anyone who is currently in receipt of PIP knows that their current PIP is protected on the current rating. However, we will end up with a system where there is lower levels of support for people who have what is, by the criteria, quite a high level of need. And that certainly doesn't run in line with my belief system.
So, as far as you're concerned, you're still not happy with the bill as it stands?
Look, I completely accept that there's a need to deal with the rising costs of social security. I completely accept that we need to try and do something to get people back into work. Work is beneficial for people on a range of different levels, in addition to, of course, being beneficial for the economy and the taxpayer. My problem with this is I think there are better alternatives available that just simply haven't been looked at. Why do we have a situation where half the bill is going to be made up with people with mental health issues? You know, when in my neck of the woods, you've got one practitioner for every 13,000 awaiting assessment. Every one of those people can go to their GP and sign up for PIP tomorrow. But you'll find that when it comes down to actually getting the support you need to do something about it, you'll be on a list where you're unlikely to get help this year, next year, possibly not this decade. And all that time you're claiming PIP. Let's fix that system, and in the process, let's get the country's balance of payments back into track.
Yeah, but isn't that going to cost even more money to do that? If you need to have more people available to do assessments, where do they come from?
Well, you do up front need to put more money in. That is perfectly true. But when it comes down to dealing with a backlog, just like with the NHS and other areas, by year 5, by having dealt with the backlog, you're back in line with reducing expenditure. So you're keeping with the fiscal rules. There's no reason with the fiscal rules why you couldn't do this. In terms of where the people come from, exactly the same as with physical health. You try and look to people in the current private system. You bring those people in temporarily. You use the IPT system that was brought into place under the last government to recruit more people into the system, a short-term boost, and that enables us to deal with the backlog.
Do you think there are some people, or do you accept that there are some people on benefits that don't need them?
It's possible. Look, I think actually the reality is you could create the most stringent system on the planet. There will be one or two people who work out a way to game it. The question is whether or not we shouldn't have any support at all because some people game the system. And I think that if you are a disabled person who's incapable of washing yourself, dressing yourself, feeding yourself, the fact that one or two people game the system wouldn't give you any comfort if you were left there to rot.
Yeah, sure, but I mean, there's clearly other cases. I mean, we've heard from a woman today who says that because she doesn't get a free bus pass anymore, she applied for PIP so that she could get money to pay for taxis to take her to places. I don't know what her circumstances are, but presumably if she can get on a bus, then she's not completely disabled to the point where she can't travel. And you wonder whether there's so many cases like that where people have become, I don't know, dependent on the system, where the system was originally intended to help them to get into work, but instead it's helped them to not get into work.
Well, I think what you've highlighted there is when you make small savings in one place, it can come back in much bigger places as costs to the public sector. And that's exactly what we suspect will happen here. Once you've removed the ability to give small amounts of money to people to help take care of themselves, the burden of that is ultimately going to fall on social security at much, much higher costs to local taxpayers.
And what about your current situation then? I mean, as far as you are aware, we're told there's about 50 rebels still who won't vote with the bill. Are you in that camp?
I am in that camp. I reject the name rebel. I'm standing up for my constituents and I'm standing up for the values of my party.
OK. Well, it's not me calling you a rebel, it's the Labour Party that's calling you a rebel. Do you think there might be others? Do you think the number could increase between now and the time the vote comes?
The interesting question, and certainly yesterday it looked as if the select committee chairs were increasingly uncomfortable with the compromise that it reached, looking like it had actually been turned back on. There were elements of what was being presented which was not in the deal that they'd agreed to at the end of last week. It could very well be that there are greater numbers out there that haven't currently got down to oppose, who are going to oppose, but also, you know, you've got to bear in mind there might be a much, much greater number who abstain. And if you get 60 people to abstain, then that 50-odd people starts being enough to overturn the bill.
Interesting. And how would you describe in one word the first year of Keir Starmer's prime ministership?
2 words, teething problems. But, you know, we're getting there.
You're getting where?
we're getting to a situation where we're starting to make some headway on the missions. The whole thing about having a mission-led government as opposed to just having some short-term goals is that they take a long time to deliver. And these are all big things. They're things the country has to resolve if we're going to deliver a future that's really worth living in this country. It takes time. You know, trying to build 1.5 million houses is an enormous target, for instance. Trying to deal with the economic situation for ourselves is incredibly challenging, even though we are already managing to outperform other G7 countries. It is a lot of effort. It is a very difficult time period to be in, and I don't think there's any shame in admitting that.
No, I couldn't agree more. Peter, thank you very much indeed. Peter Lamb, Labour MP for Crawley, doesn't want to be called a rebel, but is one. He's not going to vote with the government tonight and says there might be enough people who actually vote the bill down, which would make it a very miserable first anniversary indeed for Keir Starmer.